Thank you, Sahana, and I am very grateful that I am joined by my guests, and I don't need to be very intelligent or clever or anything, because these guys are going to do it for me. But I'll let them introduce themselves. Doran, do you want to go first?
Sure. My name's Doran Hallis. I'm a group product manager at Booking.com, where I've been for about 6 months. I have a long history in the travel industry. I've held roles at Skyscanner, Expedia, among others. Also did a stint in Asia, worked for a big property portal. Mostly consumer-facing product.
Amazing, thank you. And I was going to ask you as well, as a little icebreaker for the audience, what your best use of AI has been recently, because we need to kind of tie it into the whole AI conversation, otherwise you might feel left out.
Yeah, I mean, I use it all the time, but my favorite use case is, so I love crime thrillers, and I read quite a lot of crime thrillers, and I come across this guy, his name's Ajay Chowdhury, and he happens to be the ex-founder of Shazam, which he sold to Apple, and he's become a crime writer. I discovered that he uses AI to write his books, but he doesn't say, hey, AI, write me a book. He uses it to generate pictures which depict the scenes that he's going to write about, and then he prompts the AI to kind of help him get the juices running. And I thought that was such a cool, innovative use of AI, because instead of like worrying that as a novelist the AI is going to eat his breakfast, he's embracing it and using it in a fairly unexpected way. So I absolutely love that.
Amazing, thanks, Doran. And Tara, do you want to go and let our audience know who you are?
Yeah, sure. So hi, I'm Tara. I'm a product leader at Wolf & Badger, kind of sitting across the kind of head of product sphere, so all of our product teams, as well as taking on some of the more strategic projects. I've worked in the kind of like marketplace space for maybe 6-7 years now. So started my product career at Amazon, and then I actually worked at the Natural History Museum for some time, where I looked after all of their kind of e-commerce and commercial products. Do you want my AI answer?
That would be amazing.
Yeah, sure. So mine's a bit more work specific. One kind of company or like product I came up with recently was a product called Arcade AI, and they're actually a company who you can get kind of custom and craft like handmade products by like just kind of describing what you want. So they do like rugs and jewelry and things like that. So you say, I want a rug that has these colors from these walls. You can upload your pictures, and you can actually order it already kind of from them. So they already have some suppliers kind of linked into the back end. And yeah, I just thought that was a really cool way to updo your home.
Nice, thanks, Tara. And we're going to be talking about knowing your numbers and owning the room. Yeah. And you haven't yet mentioned.
No, I haven't mentioned.
You also have a background in finance.
Yeah, I'm also actually an accountant by trade originally. I kind of moved from finance and accountancy kind of into the product space at Amazon.
So a little bit cheating.
Maybe.
We'll let you off. And Jane, give us an intro.
Yeah, so I'm very lucky to be working at Content Square. It says SVP product. I'm actually a designer, but my background is product and design, and mostly in startups and scale-ups. So this is the most scaled-up scale-up I've been in, and it's fabulous.
Nice. And maybe not your best use of AI, but what you want AI to do for you?
Yeah, we were just talking earlier, and I want AI to do my housework. And to take all the laundry out of the washing machine and put it in the right drawer, because that's an absolute pain. And to do all my shopping and all of the things that are so boring. And we were saying that quite often now AI is doing all the creative stuff and the humans are left to do the boring stuff. I think we need to turn this around. I want to give all the boring stuff to AI, and then I can be human and creative.
I love that. I think that's a very good use case. And I feel like I should probably share my best use of AI, which actually wasn't that recent, but it was a little while ago. I'd just installed ChatGPT on my phone. And I was chatting to one of my kids, and I was like, have you heard of ChatGPT? I always like to kind of gauge what's going on, keep in with the kids. And he was like, yeah, I know about it. And I was like, oh, do you want to have a look? And he was like, yeah, okay. And he just like playing around on my phone for a little bit, and he gave it back to me. He was like, yeah, that was interesting. And I looked at what he'd written, and he'd had this whole conversation about how he could convince me to buy him more Robux. And was asking ChatGPT how he could convince me. And then he was like, if she's a Capricorn, should I approach this department? I was like, this is hilarious. This is what the kids are going to use ChatGPT for.
And did you have like a strange urge to buy Roblox and you didn't know why?
Well, so what I loved about it was ChatGPT was saying, maybe your mum's right. Maybe you shouldn't be wasting your money on Robux and you should be saving it. So I was like, yes, winning at life. So yeah, today we thought we'd talk all about kind of being more commercial as product people. I do a podcast, as Sahana mentioned, and recently I've had a couple of people as guests on the podcast who you may recognise. So Dave Washer, who's a bit of a kind of product legend, came onto the podcast and was talking about the product reckoning, which is all about how product people, not just managers in general, but product people are getting fired left, right and centre because they are apparently not commercial enough and not driving enough kind of commercial results. And then Matt LeMay has just launched a book. So you may know Matt LeMay, but he has just launched a book, which is great. I think it's called Impact First Product Teams. And his kind of book is all about this topic of like how we can be much more commercial as product people and much more aware of the impact that our work is having and really attuned to that. So without further ado, by the way, I'm not on TikTok. I am just looking at my notes. Normally I have my co-host here with me who's like just riffing and, I don't know, sounding a bit like Kermit. If you haven't heard him, he's from New York.
ChatGPT, how can I be a good panel host?
Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. What question should I ask first? There was one thing I was also meant to mention, which is we will take questions at the end. So if you have any questions you want to like quickly do the QR code Slido thing, and then you can ask us some questions at the end. But to kick off with, did everyone get that, by the way? All good? All good. I will leave it for a second longer. Great. And if you're at home, you can also do this. I'm like, yeah, those at home, back in the studio. I talked about the product reckoning. See, I'm really bad at this. This is why I don't do talks. I'm much better at podcast hosting. So we would love to know, how confident are you in connecting the work your team or you do to financial impact? So there is a poll in the Slido. So if you didn't get your phone out before to ask a question, then maybe you could get it out now. And so 1 is low and 5 is high. See, there's a lot of talk about e-commerce in this conference, so I was assuming that this was going to be quite high because everyone is here to sell shit. Cool, I'll give you a few more minutes. So a bit of a spread. No one's at 1, which is great. All the people that are on 4 and 5, I'm like, what are you doing in this room? You already know how to do it. Why are you here? Okay. So a kind of a fair spread, I would say. Well, we're going to talk about gaming a bit more. Sorry?
There's someone on us.
Oh, there's someone on a 1. Yes. Thank you, number 1. I'll pay you later. Okay, Doran, I've got a question for you. If someone here doesn't measure their work at all by financial terms, how do you suggest they learn the impact of the work or outcomes they're measuring?
I think, so there's the concept of leading metrics versus lagging metrics. In many cases, the financial metric is the lagging metric. I think in e-commerce, probably less so because you're selling stuff. So when you're selling, you're getting an impact. But even so, like you could be on a pricing team in an e-commerce environment, and it could be that you're not pricing correctly. So if you're in an e-commerce environment, what you really want to care about is your revenue. And if you're not in an e-commerce environment, you will have a leading metric, what one would call a value creator. So for example, you could be obsessing over engagement. You could be in a product team. You're measuring engagement. The engagement doesn't translate directly into business impact. But if you have your metric that can measure how the user will retain, for example, using a retention curve, that retention curve you can then translate into a financial metric. So essentially, understanding what your leading metric is all you need to really understand your financial impact.
And is everyone comfortable with what leading and lagging? So I'm going to make this quite conversational. Everyone's nodding, like leading, lagging metrics. Yeah, okay, cool.
So engagement metrics tend to be leading, your financial metrics tend to be lagging, your revenue.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
And Tara, let's go to you, although this is a bit of a cheat. But over the years, what's helped you kind of gain confidence in understanding the financial impact of your work?
Yeah, so yes, as I mentioned, obviously did start my career in finance, did a degree in finance. So yeah, it kind of is a bit of my bread and butter, I suppose. But I think because I am genuinely really curious about kind of how organisations work and how they make money, the most important thing for me, especially when like joining a new organisation, is trying to understand how the business runs their kind of flywheel. So obviously Wolf & Badger is a marketplace, so we have brands on one side and customers on the other side, but actually a lot of our revenue and a lot of the kind of the main part of how the business is driven is actually by the brand's subscription. So although customer growth and customer revenue is really important, actually having brands on the platform paying the subscription fees and staying happy is actually often more of a driver for us. So really understanding that and kind of also where the business wants to go. So, is it that it's looking for investment? Is it wanting to be bought? Is it, trying to, tackle new markets, and understanding that in kind of financial terms, what do we need to do together?
And how did you get really familiar with the numbers? Because so I worked at Go Compare for a while, and Sally, my old boss, who Jane, she's now at Carwow. She always used to say to me Lily, you have to know your numbers. So how did you get familiar with those numbers to understand how they all kind of come together to actually make up the business that you work for? Yeah,
so I mean, I've been really fortunate in that most of the companies I've worked at, data is really accessible. And that's not kind of just dashboards and reports, but actually kind of raw data. So you can actually say, I'm really looking to understand, how many sales are we making next month? Pull that yourself and use tools. So we use Looker at Wolf & Badger. And really genuinely practicing with that and bringing that to my kind of leadership and saying, it looks like there's a gap here, or I'm not understanding why, our average order value isn't going up. Almost getting them to then say, oh, well, actually, we're not worried about that today, or actually, that's not really how we're looking at it. And learning truly by kind of practicing and really embedding yourself in those data tools.
Yeah. Jane, how about you?
Well, the way I familiarised myself initially is I realised as a designer, people didn't really tell you. You were like a mushroom, you were kept in the dark and fed. So I thought the only way to become a better designer is to really understand why I'm designing, because you're not designing for the customer, you're designing for the business to serve the customer. So I needed to understand the business, so I chose to do an MBA, and that was such an amazing investment. I did it with Quantic, which is it's a startup that gives MBAs. And we were just talking earlier, because that one I think cost something like £3,000 when it started. And I learned so much, and I'm so confident with numbers now. And I was also looking at proper MBAs, and they were up to 100,000.
Yeah.
So, I think, don't be intimidated. I think it's really worth searching out something like Quantic and going out and arming yourself if you don't know this, because now I really understand everything from economic models to business cycles to data. And I think it's definitely worth the investment.
Nice.
And then I'm also lucky enough to work at Content Square, which is a data organisation. And that's been really accelerated my learning as well. And we have a wonderful CFO, and she's sort of made it her mission to educate the company too. So she's kind of giving us mini MBAs. She's presenting this is what EBITDA means. Lots of people don't even know what EBITDA means. So she was explaining all of this and making sure we're all this sort of level of basic financial literacy. And then combined with the data, combined with our OKRs, it's allowing us to make much more informed decisions. So it's great. I think it's not just, it's partly on you and it's partly on your company to support you.
Yeah. Show of hands, how many people have an MBA? Oh. How many would like an MBA? How many feel like they don't need an MBA? They're way too clever already. Oh, everyone's just like on the fence with this stuff. Okay, and then I guess like it would be interesting to understand from your point of view, like how necessary you think this is really. You know, Matt and Dave Washer are saying like everyone's getting fired because they're not commercial enough. Like, do we really, really need to be this commercial, or do we just need to focus on the objectives that kind of cascade down into the business? You know, we mentioned engagement earlier. Do we need to actually just focus on engagement or CRO or whatever it is, like, or do we really need to understand like the full picture?
No, you need to understand the full picture. I think, so when I said, yes, you have engagement metrics that are a proxy to your business performance, you need to show as a product manager a certain form of critical thinking. So if you don't know the big picture and you just go about, and it could be that somebody's giving you instructions that don't make sense, and then when the day of reckoning comes, it's no fault but your own. So you need to show critical thinking. In many cases, you need to manage yourself, where you can learn by osmosis. If you attend, we've got trading meetings every week, and everything is opened up. And anyone in the organization can go into the Zoom call, can attend the trading meeting, can listen, can ask questions. You can see the numbers, you can see what you're doing. And then people are asking really intelligent questions. People who are not necessarily senior people. They're saying, hey, why are we doing this? This doesn't make sense. And actually, in many cases, the strategy gets changed as a result of feedback of this nature, and that's how you own your career. That's how you end up growing, getting promoted, is by actually extending yourself, and by understanding the numbers to a very great degree. It'll help you do that.
And Tara, how about you?
Yeah, I was just going to add to that actually. Yeah, that I think to add to Doran's point, it's also about like motivating your product teams. I think generally, as product managers, you know, and designers, you want to be, you know, building and creating products that people love. It's not, you know, not that anything's just going to like sit on the shelf. So it is that you want them to use it, but you know, you often measure that through, the financial success and the business being a going concern and, you know, growing. So I definitely find that, you know, not only kind of product and design, but, you know, engineers as well, they're actually so much more motivated if you're truly showing them that, hey, look at all this great work you've done, and this is truly what it's doing to like the bottom line. It means we, you know, open these new doors. It means we can work on these new fun things. So yeah, I think it's not only important just for, you know, putting it into that like negative spin of, oh, this is really important for the business. I think it's really important to like grow your team and get everyone kind of passionate about the business.
And I think you mentioned that at Wolf and Badger you actually do financial kind of forecasting at like alongside the product work. So you assigning impact at that point.
Yeah, so particularly for our kind of like bigger strategic projects, so we kind of have a bit more like an annual cycle, I suppose, the kind of big bets, we call them. Yeah. Those, you know, we are kind of doing that financial assessment to say, you know, what do we think these are going to drive? You know, what hypotheses we put behind them, you know, why do we think this is the kind of next big thing we should be working on? And they are kind of ranked and reviewed and discussed with kind of senior leadership, but, you know, everyone in the product team is involved in those calculations and has, you know, a voice in that process. Yeah, so that it's kind of fair assessment. It's not kind of who speaks the loudest.
Yeah. Do you have anything like that, Jane?
Pretty much identical.
Really?
We have sort of impact sizing. We have our big bets. We sort of rank them. We have an amazing data team, so we work out which one we should do, what kind of the upside we expect, and we use that to generate the OKRs, and that flows down to the teams that then generate their own sort of team level OKRs, and then we have a cascade down. So it's really good, it's really connected. But I was going to build on what you say. This is like, there's a slightly different lens to this too, which is you're talking about what you should do. It's also what you shouldn't do, because particularly I think maybe it's my background as startups and scale-ups, but you can't fix everything. You can't make everything amazing. You have to like decide where you're going to put your effort. And I've had junior designers like sweating details for weeks and weeks about something really unimportant. And I think that's again where you need to be commercial, because there's really no point doing this. And I'm saying this as somebody who loves the customer experience, but sometimes think some things it's just not worth doing. And if you don't understand the commercials and you don't understand the business strategy, and that maybe you're playing in this area, this is a hygiene factor, maybe very few people are looking at it, it's not worth investing 3 weeks. It might just be 3 days. So I think even these very granular tactical decisions, you can't make them properly if you don't have that full business context.
Yeah. One of my favourite things is when one of my product managers comes to me and goes, not going to do this anymore because it's not going to actually make any money or like have any impact. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that's fine. Make that decision. It's great. Okay, moving on to the next section. So we have another question for the audience. How accessible is financial data in your organisation? We really wanted to ask this question because we felt like this was a bit of a kind of prerequisite for actually being a commercial product person. So we'll let the data come in. Ooh. Oh.
A lot of real-time reactions.
Yeah, exactly.
It's almost like looking at an A/B test on,
Yeah.
the second day that it's launched.
That's an even spread, isn't
wow.
it? Yeah.
I'm surprised with the number of twos.
Two
I
is
think
winning.
it's really interesting. In the first one, everyone felt quite confident at demonstrating their commercial impact, but actually the level of data that's available is lower than everyone would like, than a few people would like. So does anyone want to shout out and let me know what is blocking access to this financial data? This guy. Oh, go. No.
I was going to just say, I'm from the John Lewis Partnership, and our data is accessible to everybody, but there's so much of it that I think it's people don't know where to go to get it, and then they don't know how to interpret it.
Yeah.
And I think that's our biggest challenge.
Yeah.
Is that it's very accessible, but no one really.
You almost need a
not many people
dashboard.
Use it.
Yeah.
Because then they don't know.
And if anyone was at home and couldn't hear any of that, the lady was just saying that the data is there, but it's not, and it's accessible, but it's not very easy to interpret. Anyone else? And there's a mic.
Yeah, we have multiple businesses, and that we're looking at data on. We have lots of data, but it's not very accessible, and it's kind of held on by a central sort of team. And I think that's really the challenge for a product level, is getting access to that data and then being able to cross it with the other data that we have.
Yeah. It's interesting. I feel like the tools, the capability of like data tools is making that whole kind of landscape change, so that the need for data people is not quite so strong. You can have like everyone accessing data if once it's got to that point where it's set up and you know in a way that means that you can get your hands on it and analyze it yourself. Cool. So for you guys, I'd love to understand how mature are your product teams and other teams in your business, and perhaps in past businesses, because you might say everything's great now, but I'm sure it's probably hasn't always been that way. My assumption is that sales and marketing are kind of a bit more commercial than, say, engineering and potentially design. But yeah, what's your experience?
I think that's fair. I obviously can't speak to the engineering organisation, but I think our design team, was mature, but the maturity wasn't evenly distributed in terms of the commercial understanding. So that's something I've sort of been working on with the team, and even just trying to get people to start thinking about it. So, but it's definitely, many places I've worked, the design team in particular has just almost shied away from this horror of commercial, and you know that can't possibly be me. I'm a designer. So I think there's definitely been an issue, and I think actually when I started I didn't have a clue about anything, and it took me quite a few years.
Not even design.
No, not a thing. Yeah. But yeah, like it really took me, like as part of getting promoted and sort of seeing things from a higher level and realising I haven't got a clue here. What is going on? And I couldn't understand how my work contributed, and I couldn't make a case for why things had to be done. And that's part of the reason I did that MBA. I felt I needed to have that armour and that understanding to be good at my job.
A bit of a foundation.
Yes, exactly. And the ability to be able to have these much more elevated discussions rather than, because I think design's often seen as a kind of decorative team that makes things blue, and I wanted to be talking about things like, should we be even building this?
Yeah.
And you can't have those sort of conversations if you haven't got the ability to understand the financial context and business context. So I've really invested myself in this, and that's something I talk to everybody in the team about. It's really important to know this because it makes you a better designer.
Yeah.
It's part of your job.
How about you, Tara?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Our company's actually kind of not the opposite, but we previously used kind of an agency for marketing, and our marketing team's kind of quite separate from maybe the rest of the business, whereas product sits really closely with data, it sits really closely with finance. I mean, we're super small. We've got a finance team of 3, data team of 2. So they're not, you know, it's not these huge teams that are really hard to kind of contact and have conversations with. And product and tech is quite a big part of the business. So because we're kind of really closely working with that much smaller teams, we actually are very commercial, kind of very business kind of focused teams. But there are a couple of things that we've also done, like kind of as a, I guess, more like product tech data function. One of which is we have this kind of self-appointed group of what we call looker legends, which are people who are really confident using the data, and you know, just people either that are really passionate about it from across the business. But it's really interesting. Like a big chunk of those people in that kind of you know, community are product and tech people. But they people can come and ask a question. There's kind of like drop-ins that we do training, so that people are kind of like what you touched on there. You know, they've got all the data and they're starting to feel a bit more confident using it. And it doesn't feel like you're having to badger the 1 or 2 data people. You can just put your question on there, like, oh, has anyone built a dashboard for this? Or really just trying to find out this one answer, and someone will just post a link, and it's really opened up the team's kind of knowledge sharing there. So yeah,
it sounds like that would be like quite a good answer to, you know, in an environment where there's access to data, but it's probably a little bit like hard to interpret, having those people who are your champions for, they know the language, or they're familiar with the data, and they can kind of cut through and answer those questions and support that.
And often it's that, you know, maybe someone who isn't super commercial is asking the question of like, oh, I just want to know how many people are doing this like one thing. Like they're not even asking it in a kind of data-led way, but actually, you can kind of come to this group and say, oh, are you looking for traffic? Are you looking for click-through? Like, what is it you're really trying to understand? And again, you're kind of doing that feedback loop of saying, you know, what is it you're truly trying to identify by your question? Yeah, here's a whole host of data, or, you can answer that here, we've already got it. So it's really helpful.
That's good. Hearing this, it just makes the reason I joined Content Square is to like, because data is so important, having done the MBA, and it's so difficult. And you just want, you know, rather than having like one person that has to be asked, this ability to have like visual data or to integrate data and then query it and get the answers really quickly. And I was like, God, yes, I made the right career choice.
And I think it is going back to what you were saying earlier about the understanding the financial language as well, and the things like unit economics, EBITDA. So I worked in a company where at every all hands, the senior leadership team would kind of give you a bit of a lesson on EBITDA and what it meant. So it was kind of like, you know, drummed into you. This is what EBITDA means, and this is why it's important for you because you have shares in the business, and so you know it's going to make it's impacting you personally, financially as well, which I thought was fantastic. It was a really good business from that point of view. Booking is known as a kind of very, very data-driven company. So how kind of savvy commercially, I think, from a finance numbers point of the teams there, and do you need to do anything to make them better, or are they just amazing anyway?
So I think there's a big difference between looking at the income versus the outgoings, right? So on the revenue side, on the income side, it's all very well defined, and everybody's really clear on the OKRs and on the targets, and you run experiments, and the experiments have incrementality, and you have very clear criteria. Everyone understands the financial impact, all good. Where it kind of doesn't work as well is actually, and this, talking about MBA, this is almost like a management accounting question. It's like, okay, how much is it costing me to run my service, right? I'm running a search platform, right? And I'm getting 5 billion searches per month on my platform. how much does a search cost me? I literally tried to find that data, and it's all blended and it's kind of in a line item. And I'm like, I can't break that apart. I don't know what my service is costing me. I don't know, my team doesn't know. So it's almost like, okay, it's a fixed cost and somebody's taking care of it. And I think the time of reckoning will come. If I were a betting man, I would say that, 6 months from now, 1 year, they're going to say to me, how can you justify this platform? Is it profitable? Everything we're doing to improve the platform, is it profitable? How are you allocating your costs? It's almost like a case study from an MBA. It's like, so that's where it gets really, really interesting. But even within the product teams, we've got like growth teams, people that are doing growth marketing. We have very, very intricate, detailed, and best-in-class ROI models. So when we run a campaign, we know here's what the campaign cost us, here's what we got back. We have models, what is this going to look like 2 years from now, 3 years from now. It's all fantastic. On the cost side, I think, not just us, I think I've worked in many consumer-facing businesses over the course of my career. Allocating cost is an art that nobody really knows how to do.
Yeah, 100%. True. Cool, okay, I feel like we could carry on this strand a lot, but let's move on to the next bit. So, bit of a quiz for you guys again. What's more important, a great customer experience or an experience that drives business results? And no, you are not allowed to say it depends.
Yeah. I tried to say both and she wouldn't let me.
Oh, it's a line
1 being low, 5 being high. Ooh, that doesn't really work. I love it. Okay, maybe we do a show of hands for this one instead.
Can we do the colours?
I was just going to say, does the middle means compromise both?
Maybe.
Yes, yeah, that's the both. But let's do the colours. I'm so excited by these bracelets. We could do
Okay.
red for the customer, green for the money.
Sounds good. Red for the customer, green for the money.
How fun.
Lots of
Business. Oh, you haven't got. Yeah. Oh, the blue. No.
The business belt.
I feel like there's a bit more reds.
Yeah.
A little bit of green.
Yeah, we're forcing you. We're forcing you to.
Want the NGO to succeed, so that's NGO. So
That's true. Yeah. So an NGO's got it. Yeah.
I mean, we had a slightly poor experience on the poll, and now have no business results. So I think the poll has answered itself.
Yeah.
Very, very quick answers from you guys.
Oh, I'd say the business, and that's quite surprising coming from a designer. But you're there as a designer. You're not an artist. You're there to serve the business by making the customers happy. But you need to make the right customers happy by spending the right amount of time and doing the right things for them. But ultimately, that's for the business.
Tara?
I was actually going to go more on the customer experience side and say that if you've got like the best customer experience, you can then monetize it. I mean, again, this does depend on the business having money to start with and deliver that great experience. But I think like great examples of this are, companies like Duolingo, started completely like free model. Once you've got a good enough product, you've got enough customer base, you can start making money from that.
There was always that thing of like, build it and they will come.
Exactly. I'm a bit of that
I don't know
mentality.
if I believe in that anymore.
Spend all that money to get
I think it was true in the past. Build it and they will come. I think now when money is tight across the board, unfortunately, there is a compromise. I think it's not a 0 or a 1. It's somewhere in the middle. You need to do both, and you need to do so in a thoughtful way, I would say.
Yeah, I agree. And the other thing that I wanted to kind of talk about is, and it's related to this, is like what you do when goals kind of contradict each other. So, if you're optimizing for business results, and then you might want to break that down into, well, I want to increase my conversion rate, but I also want to, increase retention, or like everything's just increase everything. Like, what do you do when those goals contradict themselves? And I know, Tara, you had a good example.
Yeah, I feel like there's a couple of ways you can do it. I think, again, back to the point before around using the right kind of language for who you're trying to convince. So if that is coming from a kind of leadership team saying, yeah, we want this and we want this and we want this, giving them this kind of like worst case scenario. So yeah, if we increase customers, but 90% of them are going to return their product, is that success for you? And really trying to get into the nuances of that and what are your guardrails? So is the goal then actually it's in, profitable traffic, or is it, we want to increase customer acquisition while maintaining X and Y, so that you've got the right goal to actually go after and truly build the kind of right features for that. I also think the other part of that is if you're not getting that clarity kind of from your leadership, it's taking that goal, but if we're working in culture where you've got really strong product vision and the overall like what type of experiences you're trying to drive, it's putting that goal back through that lens and saying, okay, we want to increase acquisition, but what does that mean within our product kind of vision and mission, and how do we actually want to approach that so we're not kind of affecting any of the other KPIs?
Yeah. And I know we all had, I think when we were talking about this before, we all had examples where we were like, we just want to redesign the checkout or whatever to make it more accessible and to make it look a bit better because it's mega ugly. And then you redesign the checkout and your conversion rate drops and you're like, what? But it looks so much prettier. Like, what the hell was that about? And Doran, I think you had some experience of trying to plan these kind of trade-offs, or
Yeah. Every dramatic change, so like as a product manager, you think you're delivering a better customer experience. Almost every time we've done a major redesign, and we did one at Skyscanner, we did one at Expedia like 10 years ago when I was there, and every single time it tagged. So like you launch it and people are not accustomed to it, and then you need to like give it a bit of time to recover. So there's a question of like, okay, you need a little bit of, catch your breath and, be patient and wait for people to get used to it. So that's one thing. I think in general, when you, there's a concept of enshittification. This is a word that's become quite common, and a lot of people are using it now. And we're seeing this across a lot of products. They are giving you less and charging you more. And ultimately, it'll backfire because somebody will come out and deliver an experience that's not shit. And I think when it comes to these trade-offs, you need to think about that, because even though in the short term you can probably deliver more money by putting in another paywall or putting in another pop-up, hey, have you forgotten to add X into your cart, or
more ads, more nudges.
Yeah. More ads, more nudges. At Skyscanner, we experimented with a banner on the homepage of Skyscanner, right? This banner was worth tens of millions of revenue every month, and we binned it. And the reason we binned it, even though there was a lot of money in it, was like, that's not on brand. So like, you just need to remember what your brand is, and enshittification is good for nobody. I strongly believe that.
Yeah. I think that's a great answer to finish up on as well. So we'll take it out to the audience. So let's see what questions we have here that have been how should we balance delivering commercial features which directly boost revenue with customer delight features in this new world? We kind of did talk about that a bit.
Yeah.
Jane, do you want to take that one?
Well, I think just to build on what you were saying is having that overarching vision and understanding what the complete experience of the product is like, and having some kind of a vision type or some kind of story that you understand how it all fits together. Because things go very wrong when your teams are really siloed and one person's putting a banner here, one person's putting a banner there. So I think having that completeness of vision is important, and I think it's such an incredible story from Skyscanner that the brand team had that kind of power. And I think that's really important, to care a lot about the customer experience and understand that the customer experience is going to make money, although I'm contradicting myself from earlier, but I have a completeness of vision for this too. And so I think it's important to make sure that you're thinking about things holistically and not sticking things everywhere, sticking banners everywhere and enshittifying things. Yes.
I've actually got another really good example from Skyscanner on that exact topic. So when you choose a flight and then there's a bunch of options, we called it the booking panel. So you've got your Booking.com, your Expedia, all your different partners, and each one's got a star rating. When we launched that star rating, basically what happened, the revenue that the star rating delivers is inversely correlated with the star rating. So the low-rated providers pay more commission than the high-rated providers. So that killed us from a revenue perspective, right? So this was like the mother of all hard trade-offs. Ultimately, we kept it. We kept it despite the financial hit because a marketplace is all about trust. So you need to remember that.
Yeah, it's good to have some principles, isn't it, around that? Okay, how do you build confidence at a leadership level in prioritizing features which drive engagement, improve CX, but not immediate commercial return? Okay,
That's
a good question.
I think it's the leading indicators again as well, isn't it? That you I think first of all is being holding firm against the intuitification and like short term, and understanding what vision that you're going for, and then thinking about how you measure that. So a leading indicator might be that we know that people are really happy and they return 2 times, and that's going to be our like really good customers. So retention's important. So you'll be looking at retention measures and how you make people so happy with the experience that they come back. And that sort of longer term thinking in the leading indicators is one of the ways you can challenge us.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. Like, I think I would try and think about that is not the kind of engagement or like CX features as these like really huge things. I think that's where you're going to get that blocker from leadership to say, oh yeah, we want to spend 3 months, like say, like redesigning something, and then they go, and like, what happened because of that? Nothing. We're going to like move on from that swiftly, and actually breaking it down into those much smaller pieces. So you're doing something that is driving revenue, or is like the real like big thing that you're trying to optimize, which is your like what everyone's got big attention on, but actually subtly. That's how kind of we try to like run our product teams a little bit, that you've then got this other work stream where like you're chipping away at those bits that are going to really kind of make your either like long term or your like much more kind of loyal customers like really, really happy, and keeps that kind of brand experience.
I do also think that there's a kind of counter to that, which is if the kind of senior leaders are requesting or demanding immediate commercial return, there might be a reason for that. And to have a bit of empathy with the senior leadership to understand why they're asking for it. And, is it because they have to demonstrate a certain amount of growth or return for investment so that the business can continue?
Yeah, that's a great point. How you were saying as well earlier that it's important to understand the cycle of your business. So yeah, if it were a startup, you probably have to show some things because you were going through the next round of funding, and you have to appreciate that. It's all about the context, isn't it?
Yeah.
You need to be able to measure as well. So I've seen multiple times people going and they want to build something this will drive engagement. How are you measuring that? What you're talking about, the leading indicator. Well, what is it? Like why are you measuring that? Why will that sort of, if it's a leading indicator, how can you prove that that actually is a leading indicator? It also matters if it's a frequent product or an infrequent product, right? So like all of these experience things, you can measure the financial impact quite easily through long lifetime value, repeat purchase, that kind of thing. If you're a property portal, I worked in a property portal, somebody's bought a house, they've churned. That's not bad churn, but like you can't measure retention. There's everything works differently. So you really need to know how to measure the right metrics for this kind of stuff.
I feel like the next question is a bit similar to that one, so I might...
Do you know, I think you should touch on it. I don't know if the next question is up there, because you actually mentioned this about, like, you can't quantify COGS, cost of goods. But I think that's something we haven't really touched on, which is that our job is to either drive revenue or save costs. That's how you get EBITDA. And we often don't talk enough about our role in saving money. So whether that's like understanding what's driving calls to the customer support team, and fixing that, even though it might not be generating revenue, but
Yeah.
you're saving money.
You're saving
Or the
costs.
tech debt might mean the teams are going really slow. And I think that's something we should really be much more aware of and talk about, because it's almost as important as getting the revenue in the first place. Because if it costs more to get that revenue, then that's not a sustainable business. So you need to understand both sides of the equation.
And that, I think, is definitely where, I can only speak from experiences in my companies, that's definitely less understood, particularly like technical debt, or like say it may be legacy systems that you're just like hanging on to, and like say you don't want to do a whole redesign, it's not an important part, but every time an engineer is touching that bit of the code base, it's, can of worms. And they are the much harder conversations to have. Like, we really want this time, this is as small as we can break it down, but it is something we really kind of want to tackle.
Yeah, and being able to demonstrate the impact of doing that in terms of speed of work. And
A lot of that is on the leadership. So when you're setting OKRs, if the leaders are saying, okay, we have a goal to reduce our costs, then it'll filter down and you'll start thinking, how are we going to reduce the cost? If nobody's being incentivized to reduce costs, the product manager who's relatively maybe junior is not going to start doing that because nobody's set goals to that effect.
And the next question is quite interesting. So if you have a non-transactional site, what value creation metrics can you use beyond the usual vanity engagement metrics to convey commercial value? I think this is definitely an it depends at the moment, because there must be some reason for people to come to your site that's part of your business, that's generating some kind of value, whether that's maybe you're generating leads for like a B2B SaaS product, and actually all the transactions are done offline, but it's the leads that are kind of the value bit there. And then it's like understanding the sort of value of each lead, and then what's that driving for the business.
At the Natural History Museum, like actually a massive product team there is just content, just science content, articles, but they were actually one of the most kind of experimental teams, and because someone who's using the Natural History Museum website for their like research or whatever is quite often like a very, very engaged user, someone who's more likely to either visit or kind of donate, and that's actually where the commercial element's coming from. But they would be measuring things, time on site, number of articles read, like depth of page and things like that.
Nice. Well, I think we have come to a close. Yes? Yeah. So I'm just going to finish with just a real quick, like, one sentence. What's your top tip for being more commercial in a product org? Doran, I'll go with you first.
If you have a trading meeting, I would say learn by osmosis is the catchphrase. So when I say learn by osmosis, you go into meetings that are open. If they're not open, try and get yourself in with your finance teams, with your trading teams, commercial teams. A lot of your e-commerce, you've got trading meetings. The trading meetings are your ticket.
Amazing, thank you. And Tara?
Yeah, mine's just going to be like get access to the data and like practice with it. So putting on these metrics, understanding how they relate to each other. If you've got 5 different types of conversion, how are those being calculated, and really kind of get your hands on it and ask questions.
Okay.
I think even before that is actually do the work to understand what the hell's happening. Like what is EBITDA, what does the stage of business impact, like do some reading about strategy, get some basic financial literacy, because that will make it much easier when you go into these meetings to get value from them.
Nice.
That was sort of more than one sentence, sorry.
Yeah, it was. I think you all might have done that. Which means that I can as well. And I would also say, what would I say? I would say get your CFO to walk you through the financial model for the business. That would be my top tip.
If you're a public company, read the financial statements.
Yes, that too. Amazing. Thank you so much, guests. Thank you.